So, our great panelists. I'll first be introducing Dr. Richard Monang. He is currently the African Regional Climate Change Coordinator for the United Nations Environmental Programme, UNEP, and last year received the Africa Green Climate Champion Award. He has been active in developing the continent's climate change policy over the last 16 years and is extremely widely published on this topic. Welcome, Richard. I will hand the floor over to Richard. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Katrina, and to those who are joining in. It's a great pleasure to be part of this discussion today, coming at a time which over a week, 3 weeks ago, the Intergovernmental Panel released the assessment report, which showed that the world was actually headed towards a cataclysmic point. But let me start off with an African proverb, which tells us that it is better that trials come to you in the beginning, and you find peace afterwards than for them to come to you at the end. Distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, this African proverb aptly contextualizes the core of building resilience, which can be summarized in simple terms like anticipation, readiness, and early preparation. At no time has this reality dawned on the African continent, more than the past year. As I said, 3 weeks ago, the IPCC published a 2001 report whose findings have been described in some quarters as apocalyptic. According to this analysis, the globe is on track to breach the 1.5 degree warming threshold in just 2 decades from today. For Africa, a region that is already heating up twice as fast as the rest of the globe, and with the 20 countries already warming faster than the globe, this means that the safe threshold of 1.5 degree will be breached faster in Africa than in any other region. This development carries their consequences. The GDP drop of up to 15% that was originally forecast to happen in 2030, and shrinkage of incomes by up to 75% that was projected by 2100 as a result of climate change will move much closer to the present. And with this, the escalation of socioeconomic misery that is already at breaking point is therefore guaranteed for the continent, be it food insecurity, where climate change is already lowering the nutritional value of food and costing the continent up to 16% of GDP, or youth unemployment, where the continent faces an uphill task of creating over 12 million jobs each and every year for its youth, to health, where in addition to declining nutritional value of food, which is the first line of defense against infections, the temperature and precipitation variability is already causing a surge in vector-borne diseases like malaria, where Africa already carries up to 93% of annual global malaria deaths. But this escalation of vulnerability is not complete without addressing climate change impacts on infrastructure development. For example, flooding costs anywhere between 10 billion to 9% of GDP in destroyed infrastructure costs annually in some of the most impacted countries across the continent. These losses compound progress in bridging critical economic productivity. Infrastructure needs such as energy, where Africa urgently needs to ensure access to power for its 620 million people who are energy impoverished. But climate change is only one red flag. Throughout 2020 to date, the COVID-19 pandemic has wreaked havoc on economies globally, including in the continent. But just as an insightful African proverb reminds us, if you carry one end of the stick, you also carry the other. This devastation and the responses fostered by different countries has served to expose Africa's urgent need for resilient economies. Across the globe, different countries in demonstration of resilience are offering multiple rounds of stimulus packages. Cumulatively, it is estimated that an excess of $12 trillion US, equivalent to 12% of global GDP, was issued in stimulus packages. Other estimates that developed countries access up to 17 trillion in credit lines to fund diverse stimulus packages. This was affordable because this credit was accessible at an interest rate as low as 0 in some cases. So what's the point? The same convenience that was available to other countries was not available to Africa, a region whose needs were pegged at 100 billion in the emergency stimulus. This predicament underscores the low productivity of African economies that makes them high-risk market for debt capital. The reality of minimal value addition as we speak today, where the proportion of manufacturing value added has stagnated at an average of just 10% of GDP since the 1970s, has come to bite the continent at an hour of need. The over-reliance on commodity exports without value addition, where negative price shocks directly reduce government revenues and physical space, is biting Africa. Under the changing climate, which we are already seeing across the continent, Africa needs a different economic model. It needs a different model of economic productivity where a whole of society approach is leveraged. Studies show that human capital, which is the cumulative ability of citizens to turn challenges into competitive enterprise opportunities that can fetch a premium in domestic, continental, and global market, is 15 times the value of natural capital and 4 times the value of produced capital. A productive citizenry is therefore the bedrock of productive economies, and how well public resources are invested to nurture such a population provides the best indicator of how productive our economies can be under the changing climate. But we must first ask this question: where these people are engaged right now? Where are they engaged right now? Over 80% of the productive population in the African continent is engaged in the informal sector. The story of Africa is incomplete without the informal sector, because this sector is actually the chassis on which our economic locomotion strives. It employs a large number of people in the rural and urban areas, and many of them depend on the agro sector, which employs over 60% of the population. Powering, therefore, Africa into inclusive, productive, resilient economic growth cannot successfully happen without the informal sector. And leveraging this sector to create inclusive economic opportunities is our own fierce urgency of now. And therefore, we must be able to leverage climate action solutions and the following 3 tenets that I'll leave you with are some ways in which we can move forward to build ecological resilience as well as economic resilience. And the first is, we must prioritize growing the economy, not distributing its proceeds. Africa's budgetary expenditure continues to rise, but in recurrent expenditure, not in areas that can catalyze more opportunities. Just to give an example, in the climate action area, it is estimated that Africa already spent up to 20% of its total adaptation needs annually, which amounts to $3 billion. But the big problem is that this money goes into social expenditure. The urgent need is to ensure these expenditures go into investment areas that can offer a return in economic and financial dividend, in addition to the traditional social benefits. An urgent paradigm shift in budgetary allocation, where significant investments are directed at productive investments that directly empowers the citizens to establish enterprises that deliver competitive solutions to the continent. A practical example from the work we are doing, using the $3 billion currently expended in adaptation as a physical instrument, such as cash guarantees, to enable local cooperatives to offer low interest loans to informal sector who invest in climate action solutions, such as simple solar dryers to cut post-harvest losses that cost the continent for the $8 billion, can convert these into incomes and food secured homes, and will go a long way in building resilience. It will then mean that the $48 billion in post-harvest losses that Africa faces each and every year are converted into competitive enterprises that generate incomes for households to build resilience. At the height of COVID, what we saw across the continent through the work we do, control measures necessitated the closure of open-air informal food markets, resulting in an increase in losses in the stock of perishable. We saw this by up to 50% in some cases, which was the highest globally. These informal food markets supply up to 90% of fresh produce in African cities. However, decentralizing simple climate action solutions, what we saw was that this proved effective and actually reduced the losses and increased revenue of informal market traders who deal in perishable by up to 30 times. Cooperatives were leveraged, And therefore, cooperatives incentivized to offer investments, loans to enable these informal traders to assess such effective climate action solutions can go a long way in preserving capital and catalyzing income growth among this critical population whose impact over time is inclusive economic growth and competitiveness from the bottom up that includes most of the population. And that takes me to the second point. We cannot ignore the powerhouse of Africa, our youth. The continent of Africa, over 60% of Africa's population is youthful, and therefore youth skills retooling is paramount. The young people constitute 60% of the population, and up to 80% of these young people find work in the informal sector. How these youth can be tapped to become drivers of economic competitiveness is critical. Improving, refining, and adapting their skills, regardless of their backgrounds, to align with tapping economic opportunities in the continent is critical. Through an incubation approach we developed called innovative volunteerism, we are structurally guiding young people and inspiring them to find and turn their passion into profits and retool their skills in developing climate action solutions as they decentralize these solutions that address on-demand challenges in communities. What we are seeing is that these young people are fabricating solar dryers and decentralizing them to communities, to models to be able to add value and reduce the post-harvest losses that are happening. We are seeing them recovering agricultural waste, turning them into fuel briquettes to replace charcoal, that actually costing the lives of 600,000 Africans each and every year. These young people are also sharing their experiences and lessons online to influence more youth to take up innovative volunteerism to bring climate action impact to scale. That takes me to the third point. Targeted incentives, especially physical incentives and non-policy incentives, are important. Favorable physical policies play a significant role in shifting market behavior. Yes, that we know. And investments from one area to another. An example to illustrate, if you take East Africa and Kenya, for example, where I'm speaking from today, a physical policy incentive expending value-added tax on LPGs led to a significant behavioral change, where consumers and producers in the market towards favoring this LPG actually saw an increase, not only in people investing in this area of liquid petroleum gas, but actually resulted in so many people to consume it because it created a favorable space for people to be able to invest in this area. These targeted physical incentives can go a long way in shifting both the consumer market as well as entrepreneurs in the informal sector to be able to take this up. So if this is applied in simple climate action solutions of solar dryers, that will incentivize the informal sector to pick this up, incentivize young people to get into developing these climate action solutions, exempting this value added.
You have 2 minutes left. Sorry for interrupting.
Yeah, thank you very much. In addition to these physical incentives, what is important is that incentives alone will not be able to actually bring change. What is needed is a mindset change where everybody is inspired, especially the young people, to usher themselves to action. If we do that, then we can be able to build resilient economies in the midst of emergencies. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Richard. And yeah, bang on time. Yeah, you really provided us with the continental perspective, and I particularly appreciate the fact that you've linked it to so many of the other topics that we are covering at RIFA: commodity dependence, debt, the informal sector. So yeah, that's a little advertisement to also attend some of the other sessions.